Welcome to Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. I have an amazing person here. As you know, systemic racism is just that, systemic. And we have a person here at the Bridge Alliance that is not only going to tell us about these issues, but she's going to teach us about these issues. Jeanelle Austin, welcome aboard Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing all right.
Now, Janice, before we started, I always have a little pre-op to kind of understand what it is that folks are doing. With you, I figured we should be doing this live because I was learning too much, and I figured, why not?
If I was going to tell the story, why not?
Tell it live to everybody else? So
Yes.
first of all, welcome aboard Politics Done Right.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Bridge Alliance. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so I started a company just this year, so it's brand new, trying out the entrepreneurship thing,
Right.
called Racial Agency Initiative. And I coach people to leverage their agency for racial justice. Part of what came about, so you opened it up talking about systemic racism,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. So I currently live in the city of Austin. I've lived in different cities across the United States, but about a year ago I moved to Austin. And what's spectacular about that city right now is that in 2016, the mayor put together a task force for the city to address systemic racism. And in 2017, the task force came out with 5 main areas in which they want the city to address. I believe it's healthcare, finance, education, housing, and criminal justice were the 5 areas. As a part of this initiative, they brought in the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond to host Undoing Racism workshops, which the city of Austin has funded to be able to allow both city employees and the broader community to come together for these workshops. Another organization called Leadership Austin has been hosting the Beyond Diversity trainings. And then other organizations such as Austin Health Commons and Austin Community College have been hosting racial healing and transformation circles. So you have all these initiatives really working to give people common language and experiences on how to talk about race. One of the things that I noticed, especially in debrief sessions, that there were people who would come away from these sessions and say, okay, I have these tools, but I don't know what to do with these tools. I don't know, actually, I have a hammer, I've got some nails, but I don't know how to build a house.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. And so that's where I began to imagine a different kind of way where I could come in to really walk with people and coach people on how to practice justice, racial justice, as a way of life, and coaching them to use the tools that they have and the strengths that are already innate within them to practice racial justice within their scope of influence. So what's significant about that is, remember when the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. The protests were happening, and there were people from all over the nation that were temporarily relocating themselves to protest. And not everybody can have the privilege to do that. And second, you always have to ask the question, well, what about what's going on in your community, in your own backyard, in your neighborhood, right? Because systemic racism is not just something that happens over there, but it happens everywhere.
Right.
And so many times people look at their own vocation, they look at the work that they're doing, and they actually don't think that there's anything that they can do, right? I'm just an accountant. What can I do? I'm just an HR specialist. What can I do? I'm just a fill in the blank.
Right.
What can I do? And my answer to that is a lot.
Right.
And part of the vision of my organization is to get people to pursue racial justice with joy. And the reason being is because joy is a sustainable energy. When we're pursuing racial justice based off of anger and frustration and urgency and rage and anxiety, those have their place, and those are important. It gets people out of their seat and says, let's go, let's do something. But it will also lead to burnout. So
Right.
it's kind of like sugar. It gives you a surge of energy and then a hard crash.
Right.
Where joy is more so like a complex carbohydrate, where it's going to give you sustainable energy. So where do we get joy from? We get joy from engaging our strengths, from engaging the things that we are good at. So how do we take the best parts of us and then apply those to practicing racial justice as a way of life? So I help people think through strategies, unique strategies for their life to do that work within their scope of influence with their goals. So for some people, their goals are their family. Like, how do I begin to have conversations with my family members? Thanksgiving is coming up. It's going to get tense.
Right.
How do I do that? How do I do that well? For some people, it's their job. There is systemic barriers in their job, and they're wondering, okay, how can I use my influence in my middle management position to actually get something done and accomplished? And I work with them to paint a picture of strategies and steps that they can take
with specificity.
With specificity. There we go. And either I give people an option to start with me for 3 months or 6 months, or to go a full year to actually make deep systemic changes while developing their leadership skills.
Right.
In the process.
You know, there's something that got to me. With all that you said, you have to make it joyful.
Yes.
There was,
Yes.
I interviewed another person at this conference, and she spoke about pleasurable activism. You're speaking about joyful,
Yes.
joyful handling the systemic racism with joy. In other words,
joy.
making it something that you want to do.
Right. Because anger will be there,
Right.
and it has its place, because I think injustice
Right.
will make us angry.
Right.
But on the flip side, justice brings us joy, right? And so how do we lean into practicing racial justice as a way of life? So, for example, if I am let's say a director,
Right.
And I have people under me, how hard is it for me to take a look at my employees and their pay scales and say, are my employees being paid equitably, right? So that is a way to practice racial justice
Exactly.
within your work, right?
Exactly.
You don't need like a big sign from heaven
even
to
need
say
a
this
law.
is what, right? You don't need a law to do that, right? So what does that look like? Or let's say if I'm going home to my family for Thanksgiving and I want to be able to talk about racial justice, well, before going into that kind of dynamic, because we all know like family politics can get kind of ugly and messy,
Right.
And you want to have a productive conversation, what does it look like to think about your family dynamics and what matters to your family members, and build a relationship in such a way where that they can hear you, right? So if every time you come to the table and you just start yelling at them and saying that this is what they need to think
Right.
about race, and that they need to accept people who are different from them, et cetera, yeah, they're gonna build up walls.
A wall, right.
But what does it actually go in listening first and asking a question to say, hey mom, hey dad, what are your thoughts on mass incarceration?
Or what are your fears?
What are your fears? Have you have you ever and when you say your response, can you tell me more? I want to listen to your side of the story. I want to truly understand and have empathy from your experience, and what have been your stories that have led you to this point of your belief system. So you want them
to self-examine, because in their self-examination they may realize that they themselves have to make a change.
Well, and not just that, I think it's a part of the process of community, of being in community, right? Is that we have to practice deep listening.
Right.
And I think so many times we believe that we're right and that we are on the side of justice. Like people always say, like, I don't want to be on the wrong side of history. And in that effort to bulldoze forward with our agendas, we actually leave people behind.
Right.
And that's not justice either.
Right.
Right? So justice needs to be holistic, and in the heart of it, it's doing the right thing. Right?
Right.
To practice justice is to treat people right, to treat people with loving kindness and mercy, to make sure that we're not pushing people to the margins. So what happens in effort to bring other people to the center? I push other people out.
Right.
Creating another kind of injustice, right?
Right.
So it is important, the process, the way in which we go about building racial justice in this society matters.
Right.
And we can't marginalize people to bring other people into the center, because otherwise we're doing the very same thing. To decolonize our country and our nation, we can't do the exact same thing that colonization did to us. We have to counteract it. So if colonization was based off of taking, we have to start giving. Right? We have to counter it with the very principles and morals that it ignored in the process of building up these systems. And so, sorry, I could start going on and on forever. But anyways, I work with people individually one-on-one. So it's almost kind of like a choose your own adventure book in terms of what people are looking for. And I'm super analytical. So we begin to analyze their life and say, let's put the pieces of the puzzle together, and what are your strengths so we can lean into that, because that's what's going to bring you joy to be able to sustain this work.
Jeanelle Austin, Racial Agency Initiative. Folks, look it up, because I tell you, she's definitely impressed me, and I love the thing about joy, doing things with joy, because it is sustainable, and also not doing what they have done, but do it better. Thank you so kindly for being on Politics Done Right.
Thank you. This has been a great experience.
Absolutely.
All right.